Welcome to Detectives Crime Stories. In this episode, we delve into a chilling tale of forbidden desire, obsession, and murder that shook the peaceful town of Oak Ridge, Oregon. A wife's clandestine affair with her stepson spirals into a web of deceit, ultimately culminating in a gruesome act that would forever change the lives of those involved. Let's examine the details of this haunting case. Rebecca Holloway was a vivacious 38-year-old woman known for her infectious laugh and adventurous spirit. She lived in Oak Ridge, a small logging town nestled in the Cascade Mountains, famous for its scenic beauty and world-class mountain biking trails. Rebecca worked as a real estate agent at Cascade Properties, where her charisma and knowledge of the local area made her one of the top sellers in the region. Rebecca shared her modern craftsman-style home with her husband of 7 years, Dr. Gregory Holloway, and her 19-year-old stepson, Ethan. Gregory, 52, was a respected cardiologist at Sacred Heart Medical Center in nearby Eugene. He had moved to Oak Ridge from Portland after his first wife's death, seeking a quieter life for himself and his young son. Rebecca and Gregory met when she sold him his house, and their whirlwind romance led to marriage within a year. Ethan, a sophomore at the University of Oregon studying environmental science, was a quiet and introspective young man. He spent his summers and holidays at home in Oak Ridge, working part-time as a trail guide for mountain biking tourists and volunteering at the local wildlife rescue center. Initially resentful of Rebecca's presence in his life, Ethan had gradually warmed to his stepmother, appreciating her efforts to connect with him through their shared love of the outdoors. From the outside, the Holloway family appeared to be living an idyllic life. Gregory and Rebecca were fixtures in the community, hosting fundraisers for the local hospital and participating in town council meetings. Ethan was excelling in his studies and had recently started dating Sarah Chen, a fellow student in his program. However, beneath this veneer of domestic bliss, a dangerous undercurrent of desire and secrets threatened to upend everything. On the morning of August 3rd, 2023, Oak Ridge was experiencing an unseasonably cool summer day. A light mist hung over the town, shrouding the surrounding mountains in an ethereal haze. At approximately 6:30 a.m., Dr. Marcus Fleming, Gregory's colleague and jogging partner, arrived at the Holloway residence for their usual morning run. When his knocks went unanswered, Marcus used the spare key hidden under a potted plant to enter the house, assuming Gregory had overslept. As Marcus called out for Gregory, an unsettling silence permeated the house. Climbing the stairs to the second floor, he noticed a faint, coppery smell. Pushing open the door to the master bedroom, Marcus was confronted with a scene of unimaginable horror. Gregory lay on the bed, his body mutilated almost beyond recognition. Blood soaked the sheets and spattered the walls, creating a nightmarish tableau that would haunt Marcus for years to come. Fighting waves of nausea and shock, Marcus fumbled for his phone and dialed 911. The operator, sensing his distress, calmly instructed him to leave the house immediately and wait for the police outside. Marcus stumbled down the stairs and out onto the front porch, where he collapsed, hyperventilating and struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Within minutes, the tranquil morning was shattered by the wail of sirens as police cars and an ambulance converged on the Holloway home. Neighbors emerged from their houses, whispering among themselves as they watched the unfolding scene, with a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. Detective Olivia Ramirez, a 12-year veteran of the Oak Ridge Police Department, arrived at the scene at 6:55 a.m. At 36, Ramirez had investigated her fair share of violent crimes, but the brutality that awaited her in the Holloway bedroom was unlike anything she had encountered before. As she surveyed the crime scene, her partner, Detective Jack Morrison, 41, interviewed a still-shaken Dr. Fleming on the front porch. Inside the house, forensic technicians worked methodically, photographing and collecting evidence. They noted signs of a violent struggle: overturned furniture, shattered mirrors, and a trail of bloody footprints leading from the bedroom to the ensuite bathroom. The murder weapon, a heavy crystal award from Gregory's medical conferences, was found on the bedroom floor, covered in blood and hair. As news of the murder spread, the town of Oak Ridge was plunged into a state of shock and disbelief. Dr. Gregory Holloway had been a respected figure in the community, and the violent nature of his death sent ripples of anxiety through the normally peaceful town. Local news stations, including TZ9 News and the Register Guard, descended on Oak Ridge, their vans lining the streets as reporters sought comments from neighbors and law enforcement. Detective Ramirez's first priority was to locate Rebecca Holloway and Ethan. Neither had been present at the house when Gregory's body was discovered, and their whereabouts were unknown. Ramirez issued a bolo, be on the lookout for Rebecca's red Subaru Outback and Ethan's black Jeep Wrangler. As the investigation progressed, Detectives Ramirez and Morrison began to piece together a timeline of the events leading up to Gregory's murder. They learned from Dr. Fleming that Gregory had seemed distracted and upset in the days before his death. Gregory had confided in Marcus that he suspected Rebecca might be having an affair, but he hadn't elaborated further. The detectives also interviewed Gregory's colleagues at Sacred Heart Medical Center. Many of them noted that Gregory had appeared stressed and withdrawn in recent weeks, a marked change from his usually calm and professional demeanor. One nurse, Linda Katz, 45, recalled overhearing a heated phone conversation Gregory had in his office 3 days before his death. According to Linda, Gregory had been pleading with someone to end this madness before it destroys us all. As the first day of the investigation drew to a close, there was still no sign of Rebecca or Ethan. Detective Ramirez, troubled by their conspicuous absence, began to suspect that their disappearance might be more than mere coincidence. She ordered a deeper dive into the family's background, financial records, and social media accounts. The following morning, August 4th, brought a breakthrough in the case. A state trooper spotted Rebecca's Subaru Outback at a scenic viewpoint along Highway 58, about 30 miles east of Oak Ridge. When officers approached the vehicle, they found Rebecca sitting in the driver's seat, staring blankly at the forested valley below. She offered no resistance, as she was taken into custody and transported to the Oak Ridge Police Department for questioning. As Rebecca was being interrogated, Detective Morrison led a team to search the Subaru. In the trunk, they discovered a suitcase hastily packed with clothes and a large envelope containing several $1,000s in cash. More disturbingly, they also found a small leather-bound journal filled with passionate, often explicit entries detailing a sexual relationship, not with Gregory, with Ethan. Back at the police station, Rebecca Holloway sat across from Detective Ramirez in the interrogation room. Her once vibrant appearance was now disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. As Ramirez began to question her about the night of Gregory's murder, Rebecca's composure crumbled, and she launched into a confession that would shock even the most seasoned investigators. Rebecca revealed that she and Ethan had been engaged in a secret affair for the past year. It had begun innocently enough: lingering glances, accidental touches, and late-night conversations when Gregory was working overnight shifts at the hospital. Rebecca, feeling neglected by her workaholic husband and drawn to Ethan's youthful energy, had found herself falling deeply in love with her stepson. The affair had quickly intensified, with Rebecca and Ethan stealing moments together whenever Gregory was away. They would meet in secluded spots around Oak Ridge, go on clandestine weekend trips disguised as real estate showings or mountain biking excursions, and even rendezvous in the Holloway home when Gregory was at. As Rebecca spoke, her words tumbling out in a torrent of guilt and anguish, she described how the initial excitement of the affair had given way to obsession and paranoia. She became jealous of Ethan's girlfriend, Sarah, and began pressuring him to end that relationship. Ethan, torn between his feelings for Rebecca and his guilt over betraying his father, had started to pull away in recent weeks. On the night of August 2nd, everything had come to a head. Gregory, who had grown increasingly suspicious of Rebecca's behavior, confronted her with evidence of her infidelity, text messages he had found on her phone. In a moment of panic and desperation, Rebecca had confessed to the affair with Ethan. Gregory's reaction had been one of shock, disgust, and rage. He had threatened to disown Ethan and divorce Rebecca, vowing to destroy both of their lives. In the heat of the argument, Rebecca had grabbed the crystal award from Gregory's desk and struck him repeatedly, her vision blurred by tears and anger. As Gregory lay dying on the bedroom floor, Ethan had walked in, having returned home early from a date with Sarah. Sight of his father's broken body and his stepmother covered in blood had sent Ethan into a state of shock. Rebecca, operating on pure adrenaline and fear, convinced Ethan to flee with her, promising that she would make everything right. Detective Ramirez listened to Rebecca's confession with a mix of horror and pity. The tale of forbidden love and its tragic consequences was like something out of a Greek tragedy, yet here it was, playing out in the quiet town of Oak Ridge. As Rebecca's story came to an end, she broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably and begging for forgiveness. Detective Ramirez, maintaining her professional composure, formally arrested Rebecca Holloway for the murder of Dr. Gregory Holloway. With Rebecca in custody, focus of the investigation shifted to locating Ethan. Detective Morrison coordinated with law enforcement agencies across the state, and Ethan's description was broadcast on local and national news outlets. 4 days after Gregory's murder, on August 7th, Ethan Holloway turned himself in at a police station in Bend, Oregon, about 130 miles northeast of Oak Ridge. He was pale, disheveled, and clearly distraught. When questioned by Detective Morrison, who had driven to Bend to interview him, Ethan corroborated much of Rebecca's story, filling in the gaps with his own agonizing account of the events leading up to his father's death. Ethan revealed that his relationship with Rebecca had begun during a vulnerable time in his life. Struggling with the pressures of college and still grieving the loss of his mother, he had found comfort in Rebecca's attention and understanding. What started as an emotional connection soon turned physical, and before he knew it, Ethan was embroiled in a passionate affair with his stepmother. As time went on, Ethan found himself trapped between his desire for Rebecca and his love and respect for his father. The guilt had begun to eat away at him, affecting his studies and his relationship with Sarah. In the weeks leading up to the murder, Ethan had tried to end the affair, but Rebecca had become increasingly possessive and unstable, threatening to reveal everything to Gregory if Ethan left her. On the night of the murder, Ethan had returned home early, hoping to talk to his father and confess everything. Instead, he had walked in on the aftermath of Rebecca's brutal act. In a state of shock and confusion, he had allowed Rebecca to convince him to flee with her, terrified of the consequences and unable to process what had happened. As the reality of the situation set in during their time on the run, Ethan had become overwhelmed with guilt and horror. Unable to live with the weight of his actions, he had decided to turn himself in and face the consequences of his role in the tragic events. Detective Morrison listened to Ethan's account with a heavy heart. The young man before him was both a victim of manipulation and an accomplice to a heinous crime. The legal implications of Ethan's involvement would be complex, and the emotional scars of his experiences would likely last a lifetime. The arrests of Rebecca Holloway and Ethan Holloway sent shockwaves through the community of Oak Ridge. Friends and neighbors struggled to reconcile the image of the vivacious real estate agent and the quiet college student with the sordid reality of their secret affair and its tragic consequence. Dr. Gregory Holloway's funeral, held on August 12th, was attended by hundreds of mourners. Sacred Heart Medical Center was short-staffed for the day, as many of Gregory's colleagues came to pay their respects. Patients whose lives had been saved by Dr. Holloway's skilled hands left flowers and cards at his gravesite. Dr. Marcus Fleming delivered a heartfelt eulogy, celebrating Gregory's dedication to his patients and his love for his son, while grappling with the senseless nature of his death. In the weeks that followed, the citizens of Oak Ridge grappled with the aftermath of the tragedy. The case was the subject of intense media scrutiny, with national news outlets descending on the small town to report on the salacious details of the Holloway family's downfall. Local officials struggled to manage the influx of reporters and curious onlookers, while also trying to help the community heal. The legal proceedings against Rebecca Holloway moved swiftly. Faced with overwhelming evidence, including her own confession, Rebecca pleaded guilty to second-degree murder to avoid a potential death penalty. On October 15, 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As she was led from the courtroom, Rebecca's eyes searched for Ethan, but he was nowhere to be seen. Ethan Holloway's case proved more complicated. While he had not directly participated in his father's murder, his long-term sexual relationship with Rebecca, which had begun when he was barely legal, and his failure to report the crime raised difficult legal and ethical questions. After much deliberation, the district attorney's office decided to charge Ethan with accessory after the fact and statutory rape. Ethan's trial, which began on January 8, 2024, was a media sensation. The prosecution painted him as a willing participant in the affair who had chosen his stepmother over his father. Ethan's defense team, led by prominent attorney Rachel Goldstein, argued that he was a victim of long-term sexual grooming and manipulation by Rebecca, and that his actions were driven by fear and trauma. The trial lasted for 4 weeks, during which Ethan took the stand to testify about his relationship with Rebecca and the events surrounding his father's death. His emotional testimony, detailing years of confusion, guilt, and psychological turmoil, swayed many observers. However, the fact remained that he had kept the affair secret and fled the scene of the crime rather than calling for help. On February 9, 2024, the jury returned a mixed verdict. Ethan was found guilty of accessory after the fact, but acquitted of the statutory rape charge. The judge, taking into account the complex circumstances of the case, sentenced Ethan to 3 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months, as well as mandatory counseling and community service. As Ethan was led from the courtroom, his eyes met those of Sarah Chen, his former girlfriend, who had attended every day of the trial. Sarah's face was a mask of conflicting emotions: anger, pity, and a lingering affection that she couldn't quite shake. Their silent exchange spoke volumes about the lives forever altered by the events that had unfolded in Oak Ridge. The aftermath of the Holloway case left an indelible mark on the town of Oak Ridge. Sacred Heart Medical Center established a scholarship in Dr. Gregory Holloway's name, awarded annually to a student pursuing a career in cardiology. The local government increased funding for mental health services and youth counseling programs, hoping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Dr. Marcus Fleming, still struggling with the trauma of discovering his friend's body, became an advocate for mental health awareness among medical professionals. He often spoke at conferences, urging his colleagues to be more attentive to signs of stress and emotional disturbance in their personal lives and those of their coworkers. The real estate community in Oak Ridge, shocked by Rebecca's actions, implemented new ethics training programs and support groups for agents dealing with personal crises. Cascade Properties, where Rebecca had worked, donated a portion of their profits to domestic violence prevention organizations, trying to make amends for their unwitting association with the case. Sarah Chen, grappling with the betrayal and loss she had experienced, threw herself into her studies and environmental activism. She became a vocal advocate for wildlife conservation in the Cascade Mountains, channeling her pain into a passion for protecting the natural world Ethan had once loved. As for the Holloway home, it stood empty for nearly a year, a silent reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Eventually, it was purchased by the town of Oak Ridge and converted into a community center, offering programs for at-risk youth and families in crisis. The transformation of the space from a site of tragedy to one of healing and hope became a symbol of the town's resilience. Rebecca Holloway's imprisonment brought little closure to those affected by her action. She became a subject of fascination. True crime enthusiasts and psychologists who sought to understand the depths of obsession that could drive a person to such extremes. Rebecca herself retreated into a world of denial and regret, her once vibrant personality dimmed by the weight of crimes. Ethan Holloway's journey through the legal system and his eventual release would remain a point of contention in Oak Ridge for years to come. Some viewed him as a victim deserving of sympathy and a second chance, while others could not forgive his role in the events that led to his father's death. Upon his release in 2026, Ethan chose to leave Oregon entirely, seeking anonymity and a fresh start on the East Coast. The case of Dr. Gregory Holloway's murder became the subject of numerous true crime documentaries, books, and podcasts, ensuring that the tragic case of the Holloway family would be remembered and dissected for years to come. In Oak Ridge, however, the passage of time gradually dulled the sharp edges of the tragedy, allowing the town to heal and move forward. Yet for those most closely touched by the events of that fateful summer, Dr. Marcus Fleming, who lost his best friend, Sarah Chen, who lost her first love to a twisted affair, and the patients who would never again benefit from Dr. Holloway's skilled care, the echoes of the tragedy would resonate for a lifetime. Their stories serve as a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences that can arise when boundaries are crossed and dark desires are allowed to fester. 5 years after the murder, Oak Ridge had changed in subtle but significant ways. The town had become more vigilant, more aware of the potential darkness lurking behind closed doors. Community watch programs flourished, and there was a renewed emphasis on mental health and family counseling services. Linda Katz, the nurse who had overheard Dr. Holloway's last desperate phone call, became a fierce advocate for domestic abuse awareness in the medical community. She developed a training program for healthcare professionals to recognize signs of emotional distress and potential abuse in their colleagues and patients. Her work gained national recognition and was implemented in hospitals across the country. The University of Oregon, where Ethan had been a student, used the case as a catalyst for change. They introduced mandatory ethics classes for all students, focusing on the importance of maintaining professional and personal boundaries. The Environmental Science Department, in particular, established a scholarship in Ethan's name, awarded to students who demonstrated a commitment to both academic excellence and ethical behavior. Rebecca Holloway's life in prison became a subject of much speculation and analysis. She underwent extensive psychological evaluation and treatment, gradually coming to terms with the magnitude of her actions. In a controversial move, she agreed to participate in a series of interviews with criminal psychologists, hoping that her story might serve as a cautionary tale and contribute to the understanding of criminal psychology. These interviews, later published in a book titled Descent into Obsession, The Rebecca Holloway Story, provided chilling insights into the mind of a woman consumed by forbidden desire. Rebecca spoke of her initial attraction to Ethan, thrill of their secret encounters, and the gradual erosion of her moral boundaries. She described the overwhelming jealousy she felt towards Sarah Chen and other young women in Ethan's life, and the paranoid fear that drove her to cling ever more tightly to the illicit relationship. The book became a bestseller, but was met with mixed reactions in Oak Ridge. Many felt it was an exploitation of the tragedy, while others saw it as a valuable tool, understanding and preventing similar crime. The royalties from the book were donated to a victims' support fund, as per the terms of Rebecca's plea agreement. Ethan Holloway's life after prison was shrouded in mystery. He had changed his name and moved to a small town in Vermont, where he found work as a landscaper. Those who knew him in his new life described him as quiet and introspective, with a sadness in his eyes that never quite faded. He volunteered at a local animal shelter and spent much of his free time hiking in the Green Mountains, finding solace in nature, as he had once done in the forests of Oregon. In a twist of fate, it was Sarah Chen inadvertently discovered Ethan's whereabouts 7 years after the murder. Now a successful environmental lawyer, Sarah was attending a conference in Burlington, Vermont, when she spotted a familiar face working in a park. The brief encounter was fraught with unspoken emotions, regret, anger, and a lingering connection that neither could fully explain. After a tense conversation, Sarah and Ethan agreed to meet for coffee. Over the next few hours, they talked about the years that had passed, pain they had endured, and the different paths their lives had taken. Ethan expressed deep remorse for his actions and the hurt he had caused, while Sarah spoke of her struggle to trust and love again after the betrayal. Their meeting, while cathartic, did not lead to a rekindled relationship or even a lasting friendship. Instead, it provided a sense of closure that both had been seeking for years. Sarah returned to Oregon with a newfound peace, while Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders, knowing that at least one person from his past could see him as more than just the sum of his worst mistake. As the 10th anniversary of Dr. Gregory Holloway's death approached, The town of Oak Ridge prepared for a memorial service that would honor his life and legacy. The community center that had once been the Holloway home was chosen as the venue, symbolizing the town's journey from tragedy to healing. On the day of the memorial, hundreds of people gathered to pay their respects. Dr. Marcus Fleming, now the chief of cardiology at Sacred Heart Medical Center, gave a moving speech about Gregory's contributions to medicine and the lives he had touched. Linda Katz spoke about the importance of vigilance and compassion in preventing future tragedies. Sarah Chen, who had become a respected figure in environmental law, shared how the events had shaped her life and career, urging the community to channel their pain into positive action. We encourage our listeners to reflect on the importance of maintaining healthy boundaries in relationships, the need for open dialogue about mental health and emotional well-being, and the crucial role of community support in preventing and healing from tragedy. If you or someone you know is struggling with obsessive behavior or thoughts of violence, please reach out to local mental health services or call the National Crisis Hotline for support. Thank you for joining us for this profound and troubling story. Remember to subscribe to Detectives Crime Stories for more in-depth examinations of real-life cases that have shocked and captivated communities across the nation. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember that healing is always possible, even in the darkest of times.